And we will talk about book 15. Hopefully we'll get through all the way through 16 today, but we'll start with book 15 of the Iliad. So this is part 2 in our lecture series. But we've already had the remember in the last 2 books that we read, we had the very first book where Agamemnon ticks Achilles off by, first Agamemnon's mad because he had he gave out a bunch of slaves to people when they, that they had collected when they were fighting and sacking villages and stuff. And he gave one to himself, and then he gave other slaves to other people. Well, his own slave, her father comes to ransom her. He says, no, I won't take any ransom for her. I'm not giving her up. And then the father is a priest of Apollo, so Apollo starts killing people in anger that Agamemnon won't do. Honestly, these were standard practices. It's like having a hostage and you want to make a trade, bargain for a trade for the hostage. Well, you bargain for the trade. Those are good rules of etiquette kind of in war. But Agamemnon's selfish and he wants to keep the girl, so he says no. And then when he finally is pretty much forced to give her up, he takes Achilles' slave, Briseis. And then Achilles is like, great, take my slave, fine. And he's very upset. And he goes, but I'm not fighting. And so he stops fighting. He actually begs his mom, Thetis, to plead with Zeus to help the Trojans do well, because he's not fighting on the Greek side. And so it essentially makes it so that Agamemnon realizes pretty quickly, well, after many books, but they understand that they're not going to win this war if they don't get Achilles back in fighting. And so they even offer, okay, I'll give you Briseis back. I'll give you all this treasure if you'll just come and fight. And Achilles says, no, I'm not doing it. And he's still angry at Agamemnon. And he should be. I mean, we understand the anger totally. But at the same time, people are dying because he won't fight, because he's that super best warrior ever. Probably because he's half god. Okay, so now they've been fighting since then. That was book 9. And so for the last 5 books, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, they've been losing still. They did have a point when Zeus was put to sleep. His wife, Hera, tricked him and he fell asleep. And then the Danaans, and those are all equivalent names, Danaans, Greeks, Achaeans, they start doing well. But then Zeus wakes up, he's angry at his wife, says, what did you just do? You tricked me into falling asleep. And he's back awake, and the Trojans start winning again. And they're winning to the point where they are killing Greeks, and they are shoving them closer and closer to the boats where the Greeks, pretty much have all their tents and everything, because they're on the beach, because they've sailed all the way over there. And so if they get over to the boats and they burn the boats down, the Greeks have nowhere to go. Literally, the Greeks will all probably be slaughtered. And they don't have a big wall around a city. They don't have the protections that the Trojans have. So they're in trouble. And so this is kind of where we are in 15. So he says, and when their flight had taken them past the trench, that's almost like the trench in trench warfare in World War I or something. So it's this borderline that's protecting the Greeks, and the stakes that are set, kind of marking their territory. And the Trojans made a halt on reaching their chariots, routed and pale with fear. So the Trojans aren't doing so well. Jove now woke. So remember, I told you that he'd been put asleep. Well, Zeus, this is Jove, woke on the crests of Ida. This is one of the mountains. And his wife was lying next to him. And starting to his feet, he saw the Trojans and Achaeans, the one thrown into confusion, the others driving. So he's going, what? He literally sees that the Trojans are losing. And he goes, no, we're not doing this. He saw Hector lying on the ground with his comrades gathered around him, gasping for breath, wandering in mind and vomiting blood, for it was not the feeblest of the Achaeans who struck. So Hector, who's like the hero of the Trojans, is majorly injured. He's not cut up or anything, but he's been worked over pretty bad, and he's spitting up blood. And Zeus is ticked, and he looks fiercely on Juno, his wife Hera. He goes, I see you mischief-making trickster, that your cunning has stayed Hector from fighting and has caused the rout of, in other words, you have been manipulating all of this so that the Trojans are not doing well. And he even says, I'm in half a mind to thrash you, in which case, essentially, you're going to get punished for what you've done. And he says, do you not remember how once upon a time I had you hanged? The thing is these are all immortals. They can't kill each other. But they can torture each other. And he says, look, I got the power. All the gods in Olympus were in a fury. They were all upset about it, but they could not reach you to set you free. And if they tried, I was going to punish them too. Like when I caught any one of them, I gripped him and hurled him from the heavenly threshold till he came fainting down. So I tossed him all the way down to yes. So we are mortals, which means we die. They are immortal, which means they can't die. So you can do all sorts of, you can cut them up, or you can beat them up, or you can, but you can't kill them. They won't die. And so they can torture each other though. I mean, that's what's so not good. But he goes, I've punished you before, and I will punish you again. And you got to stop trying to trick me. So he says, I would remind you of this, that you may learn to leave off being so deceitful. So don't you remember what I used to do? And she's shaken. She's like, now she's scared. And it's funny because she does this. She'll trick him and she'll do things, and then she gets caught in it. And then she's like, all scared, like, sorry. And he's already mad. And it's like, she knows what he's going to do, but she just wants it her way. And he goes, no, I'm swearing now. There is no way that I'm going to let Neptune punish Hector and the Trojans and help the Greeks. I'm not going to let this, it's fine that Poseidon, that Neptune wants to help, but he is not going to be doing this. He is not going to let the Trojans win. And so I'm going to tell him he better stop it. And then he says, if I were you, Juno, I would always support me. In other words, you got to support your man and stop doing things that when we, the truth is we as a council, as a God council, decide on these things, and you don't get to go rogue and do whatever you want. Okay. And so that's really at this point, he says, that's not how we do things. And you're not going to go against me behind my back, because you're my wife. And so now he's saying, he says, I'm going to tell Apollo, who, remember, the Apollo is on the Trojan side anyway. He can send Hector again into battle and give him fresh strength. So the gods can not only save a person's life, they can also give them energy. So if they're suffering, or they have bruises, or if they even have cuts, they can heal them and magically make it so that they can work harder and fight longer and not get tired and stuff like that. And so he says, I'm going to tell Apollo right now, he's going to go do that. He's going to give Hector some strength, and Hector's going to essentially drive the Greeks back. And then, but he says that right here, he says, this is the fate of what's going to happen. He already knows what it is. The gods actually know fate. We often don't know our fate, but gods do. And so he says, he will thus forget his present sufferings and drive the Achaeans back. So Hector's going to push the Greeks back until they fall among the ships. Achilles will then send his comrade Patroclus into battle. So he already knows that Achilles is going to send Patroclus to go fight. Hector will kill him in front of Ilias, or Ilium, that's Troy, after he's slain many warriors. So he already says Patroclus is going to go into battle, kill a bunch of people, and then Hector's going to kill him. After Patroclus kills Zeus's own son, my own noble son, Sarpedon. So Sarpedon is also a half god. But he knows the fate of his son Sarpedon. He knows he's going to die at Patroclus's hand. Patroclus is going to kill him. And then Hector is going to kill Patroclus. So he's saying right here, this is what's going to happen. To the Greeks, well, of course, the gods already know. Then Achilles, so this is the rest of the book. Achilles will kill Hector to avenge Patroclus. And from that time, the Achaeans shall persistently drive the Trojans back until they actually take Troy. So this will be the last time that the Trojans really have the upper hand. Does that make sense? So he's saying, yes, I understand you want to help the Greeks, but this has to happen first. This is the fate. And the fate is that the Trojans have to win for a while. Then Patroclus has to go in, kill my son Sarpedon and a bunch of other Trojans, then be killed by Hector, who is then going to be killed by Achilles. And then the Greeks will, within the year, win and sack Troy. So he's already saying, he goes, this is already foretold. This is already set. There's no, Juno, you don't get to go and pick whatever you want. Okay, and Juno listens. Okay, and so that's what's really important, is from this point on, they're all going to do what they have to do. And so Juno actually is sent as a messenger down to the other gods, and she says, she's like, why are you here? Yes, no, okay, Juno is the goddess who favors the Greeks. She and Minerva, or her name is Athena in the other thing, but Juno is also is Hera in the Greek tradition. And she says, but she has to help. She knows that she's been caught in, trying to let the Trojans, let the Greeks win, but she has no choice. She gets snitty about it. She goes, you know what a proud and cruel disposition my husband has. And so he's essentially saying, we need to call all the gods together. And because my husband's all snotty, but she's mad. So, and she's still snippy that she doesn't have the power to do whatever she wants, And so, but then she even says, she goes, Mars, she blames Mars, he's Ares in the Greek, but he's the god of war. And she's like, well, it's all you, it's your fault. And Mars is on the side of the Trojans, and he's like, but it's not my fault. I just like war. He really does. He just likes people to kill each other. But and he's like, he goes, no, he goes, I'm going to be involved in the war. They're all involved in the war. And this is actually part of the Greek ideal too, is that the gods, when stuff happens, it's not just one person's might and strength against another person's might and strength in battle. Gods are helping or harming everything. They have an effect on everything that happens. So, and so and they're all fighting amongst each other too. So Ares is on one side, well, Mars is on one side, but Minerva, who also she's the goddess of war and wisdom, but she doesn't just like, tons of violence. She actually goes in and she can beat up on Ares. So she goes in and tears the helmet from his head and shield from his shoulders, and she's all snotty, and she calls him a madman. Essentially, you just like war, but we have to do what we're supposed to do. And so we have to follow fate. It matters. And even when we lose our own children, of course, Athena doesn't have any kids. She's a virgin goddess, but Mars does, and he wants to protect his kids on the battlefield. And she says, no, you don't get to do that. And you don't get to get revenge against the people who killed them, because that's their fate. And so the gods, even though the gods are immortal, they don't get to pick fate either. They just know what it is. But all of that's up to essentially the three fates. There are three goddesses who weave a tapestry with people's lives in it. And so they decide when you're born, they decide what happens to you, and they decide when you die. And the gods can't change that either. Only the fates have any control over any of that. And so they have this whole council And you know what exactly they're talking about. This is just, you know, people love stories about the gods back then. So um and they're of course on different sides, these guys. And I'm not going to ask you on the test, you know, which side is so and so on and which side is so and so on. You don't have to know that so much. Though they definitely follow long lines. They're fighting with each other in the same way that the Trojans and the Greeks are fighting with each other. But that is, you know, for the Greeks, it almost makes it, it's almost like, well, these are God ordained wars. These happened because of the gods. And in even the beginning of the war, you know, with Helen, it happened because of Aphrodite, because of the goddess of love took Paris to meet Helen and convinced him to take her and steal away to Troy. Had that not happened, there would be no war. Helen would still be at home with her husband Menelaus, and nobody would be over here fighting. So hundreds of people are dying, and people are at war for 10 years because the gods are fighting. Okay. And so that's kind of where we're going with all of this. But the truth is all of the gods, even if they don't like it, they have no choice. Like, so if Neptune, the god of the seas, decides to go up against Zeus, well, he's not going to win. And besides, Zeus himself, even if he wants to save his Trojan sons, he knows he can't. So even Zeus, who's in charge of all the other gods, he knows he has to accept fate. And the other ones who don't want to, well, they need to learn. Okay. So, but they're all taking sides and they're all snotty with each other and they're fighting. Okay. So but they all get together, and then they start to move the tide of war. So Apollo actually goes down. He's the one, remember, Zeus said he was going to go down. So, well, Jove says, okay, Apollo, you go down and talk to Hector and make him feel like he can do, you remember Hector was coughing up blood and stuff. And so he was pretty beaten up. And Apollo says, why are you here away from the others? What's befallen you? And he goes, man, he goes, of the gods are you? Like, are you a god who now ask me thus? Do you not know that Ajax, he was with Ulysses, when they came and asked Achilles to fight, and Achilles said no. He says, but Ajax struck me on the chest with a stone. And so that's why I'm coughing up blood and stuff. You know, I made sure that, you know, essentially he thought today, okay, I was going to die and I was going to breathe my last and go down to the house of Hades. So why are you asking me what's wrong? I almost died. You know, that's what he's so are you a god? Is that why you're asking me what's wrong? And he's like, don't worry about it. Take heart. We're going to help you. The son of Saturn, that's Jove or Zeus, has sent you a mighty helper, and that's himself, Phoebus Apollo of the golden sword. Don't worry, I'm going to help you. He says, go get your horsemen and get your chariots to the ships. That's the Greek ships. I'm going to go before your horses to smooth the way. And I will turn the Achaeans in flight. I'm going to make the Greeks run away. Okay, they're going to retreat. And then he infuses great strength into Hector, just like Zeus said he was going to. And as a horse, you know, essentially he uses a metaphor. As a horse stabled and full fed breaks loose and gallops gloriously over the plain, well, that's what Hector did. He suddenly had all this energy. And, you know, even so, Hector, when he heard that what the god said, urged his horsemen on and sped forward. So all of his fatigue, all of the coughing up blood, all of the aches and pains in his chest because Ajax hit him with a rock, it's all gone away. The god kind of takes all that stuff out so that he can fight as if he had not been fighting all day already. And so, and then the Greeks see him. They see Hector coming in his chariot and they freak out and they start running away. Their hearts fell down at their feet. Literally, the poet says that. And they start saying, we need to do something. And he goes, is it not Hector come to life again? Like, they thought Hector was going to die. I thought he was killed by Ajax. But it seems that one of the gods has again rescued him. So they know already, okay, somebody else, some other force gave him strength. And now he's going to come and kill us. We're doomed. And he says, let us order the main body of our forces to fall back. So let's retreat. And then only the best warriors stay and fight and see if we can hold Hector back. Okay. But he says, let the majority of us, especially the weaker people who are tired, let them go back to the ships and the tents and kind of regroup while the big warriors kind of hold everybody off. So that's what they're trying to do. Well, the Trojans are just coming, but remember they've had most of their troops retreat, and even before him, Phoebus Apollo shrouded in a cloud in a cloud about his shoulders, and he is essentially he's pushing the troops back. So the gods are helping the Trojans now. So they try to stand their ground, but the weapons just don't work. Like, things that they throw don't go where they're supposed to. Everybody is kind of in disarray. Everybody's starting to panic, and they really do. They are panicking and they're running away. But then it becomes, Hector starts killing people. And all these names you don't have to remember. There's so many dang names. I would guess, and I've only read this book all the way through 3 or 4 times. Okay. But I would guess that like 1,000 people by name die in this epic poem. There's so many battles and so many people die. And so Hector kills these 2 people, and then Aeneas, also a Trojan prince, so a brother to Hector. He's actually the Roman epic poem by Virgil is the Aeneid. And that's based on Aeneas, who escapes the Trojan War. He actually is one of the few survivors, and he goes off and founds Rome. And a lot of Romans, the Roman Empire, the Romans will identify themselves as having Trojan ties. So, maybe to make the Greeks the enemy, I don't know why. But Aeneas kills a couple people, and then they keep on going. More and more of these people are killing more and more other people. So Polydamas is another Trojan, and he killed this guy and this guy. And so it's essential. And even Paris is out there. Paris is not much of a fighter, even though he's the one who caused the war. He's more of a, like, he's an archer. He shoots arrows. And that's actually, he will eventually kill, not in this book, but he'll eventually kill Achilles. He'll set off an arrow, and the arrow will hit Achilles in his heel and kill him, which is awful, but it's a terrible way to die. But so they're winning, and when they win too, they take their armor. So they kill a guy and they take their armor, and somebody else in their army can use the armor. So they steal all their stuff, kind of like in Minecraft and stuff. You can kill a person and then steal all their stuff. Well, that's what they did. And so Hector's even saying, forward to the ships. This is what Apollo told him to do. Push the Greeks all the way back to their ships. And he even says, don't worry about the armor right now. We'll come back and get it. Let's go for the boats before they can regroup. Okay. And he says, if anybody's not moving in the direction of the ships, like if you're not marching forward, I'm going to have you killed, because again, he's the one in charge. He's like the Agamemnon. He's the one in charge of all of the forces of the Trojans. And so people start going. The Trojans are moving, and they are going to the ships, and they're really going to threaten the Greeks. And so, and again, Apollo's still with them. So he's helping them beat the Achaeans. It even says he kicked down the wall of the Achaeans as easily as a child who, playing on the seashore, has built a house of sand and then kicks it down. So Apollo is giving them such an advantage. And this is a huge turn, a huge shift. Now, Nestor, remember the old guy who always advises people to stay calm? Well, he prays to Zeus, to Father Jove. He says, please, we've given you sacrifices and stuff like that. Please bear that in mind now, and suffer not the Trojans to triumph over the Greeks like this. So he prays to Zeus. But remember, Jove can't just do whatever he wants. So Jove knows that the Trojans have to push. If they don't push and threaten the Greeks, then Achilles won't fight. Well, Patroclus won't fight. And then Patroclus won't get killed by Hector, and then Hector won't get killed by Achilles. He knows all of this has to happen. So he can't answer that prayer. He can't just make it so that the Greeks win. And so literally the Trojans have pushed them all the way back until the Greeks are climbing up into their ships. And they're trying to get ready for a sea fight, which they haven't had yet. Like literally they're thinking, okay, we're going to have to fight from our ships, which is not going to work. This is going to be bad. We're doomed is what they're thinking. And Patroclus, remember, he and Achilles and all of the Myrmidons, the Achilles's group, haven't been fighting, but Patroclus has been watching, and he's upset. As long as they're over on the other side of the walls, on the other side of the trenches and stuff, he's like, okay, well, they're just fighting. But when he sees everybody climbing into their ships, he's thinking, oh no, this is not, now the Trojans are on our beach and they're all, all the Greeks are in a panic. And he's like, he goes, he says, I know you want me badly. This is to Eurypylus, but I cannot stay with you any longer, for there is hard fighting going on. So he's saying, I can't stick around here. I need to go and talk to Achilles. And he even says, I need to make all speed to Achilles and induce him to fight. And maybe if he listens to me, he will go out and fight and help the Greeks. Okay. And so they're still fighting. This is in the middle of the fight. The fight has not stopped. It's not like they've stopped for the night or something like that. They're still fighting. Hector is still driving. He's actually going after Ajax, who had hit him, remember, and made him cough up blood. And now he's not actually able to force Ajax back, because Ajax is, I guess, some big thug. But Ajax can't drive Hector back either. So they're kind of in a stalemate. And so again, it's more and more people fighting each other back and forth and back and forth. And Hector even aims a spear at Ajax, but misses him and then hits a different person. And then, but he's definitely, they're in trouble. Ajax is upset because one of his buddies was killed. Says to his brother, hey, we're in trouble because Hector has just killed my friend. Fetch your deadly arrows at once and essentially shoot down Hector. And of course, that's not gonna work. So they're still fighting all of this stuff. And Teucer even aims his arrow at Hector. And it says there would have been no more fighting of the ships if he'd hit him and killed him. But Jove deprived him of triumph by breaking his bowstring. So the bow that he uses to set the arrow off, just as he was drawing it, the arrow went astray and the bow fell from his hand. So, but again, the gods are meddling. They're making it so that Hector doesn't get killed, because Hector can't get killed. That's not his fate, not yet. And even the whole idea is not that you die or you don't die, but who kills you is part of your fate. Who does what? Who has the triumph over whom is part of your fate. So Hector's not going to lose, because he has to keep pushing, because then if he does, and he's just killing people. There's so many. This is almost it's ludicrous, is what it is. But in the meantime, where's Patroclus? Patroclus has, while all of this battle is going on, and while Jove is helping out the Trojans, because it says he meant to give glory to Hector, son of Priam. And he even said, letting him throw fire upon the ships. So they were going to burn the ships until to satisfy essentially what he promised to Thetis, Achilles' mom. And so Hector's just going, and they are not going to lose. Look how long this paragraph is. But it's all fighting. Hector's killing this person. He's fighting that person. He's pushing this person. And all of the Argives are under Agamemnon, and they're all being scattered. They're all broken up. They're retreating to their ships. They're running out of strength. Nestor is pleading with everybody. So it's just all bad. Okay. And so, and all the people can see that Hector's just, he's not going to stop. And so, now it's, honestly, this is a point where they could literally destroy the Greeks today. And this is, and what they had to do is create, I mean, it's almost like creating suspense or whatever. And so what's going to happen is this, and then this is the next chapter. I'm going to go back to the table of contents, and this is the kind of the crux of the next chapter, chapter 16, is that Patroclus has to do something. Okay, so Patroclus, and we, it's really graphic. It's almost honestly cinematic, this, because it shows us all this stuff, and it just keeps piling it on and piling it on, and we're all gritting, like biting our fingernails. What's going to happen? And Patroclus goes to Achilles, and he's crying, literally, tears welling in his eyes. And Achilles is like, "Why are you crying? Why are you weeping like a silly child that comes running to her mother?" Like, he makes fun of Patroclus. And he says, "Patroclus, are you now shedding tears essentially like a mom would shed tears? What's going on?" And he's got his tents kind of like off to the side, so he's not watching the action. The only reason Patroclus knows is because he was over in the main Greek camps. So he's watching them get attacked and lose. They are losing. Okay. And he says, "I've heard," he goes, "I think I know fighting's happening over there." He goes, "I've heard we lost a lot of people." And he says, "Are you grieving about the Argives and the way in which they're being killed at the ships?" In other words, Achilles doesn't have a whole lot of sympathy. He's just kind of like, "Is that why you're crying?" And he says, "Don't hide anything from me, but tell me that both of us may know about it. In other words, tell me what's going on." And Patroclus says, "This is bad." And he says, "Don't be angry, but I'm weeping for the disaster that has befallen all the Greeks." He goes, "They are literally being pushed to the ships, and they are losing." Diomed's been stabbed so Diomedes, remember the guy from before? He's been hit with a spear. Ulysses, or Odysseus, and Agamemnon have also gotten wounded by swords. Eurypylus has been stuck in an arrow in the thigh. Everybody is literally wounded. So our greatest heroes are suffering. Some of them are dead. And he goes, and he even finally, he looks right at Achilles and says, "Who in this future story will speak well of you unless you now save the Argives?" In other words, if you're going to be a hero someday and, be in an epic poem, you better save these Greeks. If you don't save them, no one will speak your name after this. And he even says, "You have no pity. You're not human. You're not even related to a goddess, because you don't care about the cruelty that is happening around you. You just don't care." And he's angry. He's really angry. So he tears into his friend and says, "Look, you're being a jerk. And I know you don't care about anything because you're not even acting like a human. You're just awful. Especially if you don't care that they're dying out there." And he says, "We're fresh. We haven't been fighting. We could totally drive back the Trojans if we would go and fight." And Achilles is moved. He does, I understand what you're saying. But he goes, "Okay, that's nice. But all the prophecies say if I go out there, I'm going to die." And so, they picked that. And Agamemnon chose to take Briseis away. They chose to treat me unfairly. They chose to insult me. And then he says, "Still, let bygones be bygones. No man may keep his anger forever." So you think, okay, he's going to go and fight. But he says, "I said I would not relent till battle and the cry of war had reached my own ships." And he says, nevertheless, and this is what he says to Patroclus, now gird my armor about your shoulders and lead the Myrmidons to battle. In other words, take my army, Patroclus, put my armor on yourself so that they think you are me, and chase them back. They won't tell because your visor is going to be down. Your helmet's going to cover your face, so they won't know that it's not me. Had they seen me out fighting, they would have run away. And I would have been out there fighting had King Agamemnon dealt fairly with me, but he didn't. And so I'm not out there. But if you want to, if you want somebody out there fighting, then you put on my armor, which is a really weird thing to do. It's like, I'll let you use my mystique and my fame to, and everybody thinks that I'm such a great warrior. I'll let you use that to go and beat the Trojans, but I'm not going to put my armor on. But he says, okay, fine. Go ahead, Patroclus, fall upon them, save the fleet, lest the Trojans fire and prevent us from being able to return. But then he goes, so you put my armor on, go fight as if you're me, but, and he goes, you'll win, you'll get me great honor, and then I'll get the girl restored to me, and I'll get the rich gifts in the bargain. But once you've driven the Trojans from the ships, come back. Don't go all the way, because Troy is set off. It's probably a mile or two away. And so don't leave the beach. In other words, save the ships, chase the Trojans until they run away and go back to their city, but don't chase after them. Don't keep going to the city walls. So he says, you can use my armor, but don't let it get to your head, and don't want, try to keep on killing the Trojans all the way to Ilium, to Troy, because one of the gods could come and attack you. For Phoebus Apollo loves the Trojans. So he says, as soon as the ships aren't in danger anymore, come back. If you try to chase, and in some ways, Achilles is right. He knows the fate that's going to happen. But he doesn't want it to happen. So he's warning him that, once you free the ships, don't go any farther. But of course, what's Patroclus going to do? He's going to go farther. And he just says, promise me though, that you'll come back so that we can both be alive. Okay. So Patroclus ends up taking on the, he's going to put his armor on. And the truth is we already know, Zeus already said, Jove said, this is the fate. Patroclus is going to take Achilles' armor and go fight in his stead. Patroclus is going to get killed. Hector is going to kill him. And then Achilles is going to kill Hector in revenge. And so we already know the truth is, though, all the people listening to this poem back then would have known it all anyway. They know the story. They just like to hear how it's told, I guess. So, Achilles essentially, he spurs on Patroclus and he says, up, noble knight, for I see the glare of hostile fire at our fleet. So the fires, the burning ships are actually reaching the Myrmidons now. And he says, so I don't want our fleet destroyed. And so gird on your armor at once. And that's Achilles' armor. And so Patroclus put on Achilles' super fancy armor made by the gods, because Achilles even gets fancy stuff. And they're all, his sword is made of bronze. And he describes his shield and all sorts of stuff, but the truth is all of that armor would have been recognizable. And even the sword and the spear, everything that he had with him, those were all recognizable as Achilles. Okay, so he's going to take on Achilles. He really does. He puts on Achilles' armor, and then Achilles goes and rounds up all the troops and has them put on their armor. And essentially his group is pretty big, because they're in 50 ships. So he's got, probably, my guess is he's got 2,500 people that are his people. like 50 on a ship, maybe as low as 20 if they're really small. But even says there's a crew of 50 oarsmen. So yeah, there's at least 50 on a ship. But he draws them all together, and they know they're in on the secret. So the Myrmidons know that Achilles is not fighting with them, but even just seeing Achilles' armor on Patroclus makes them feel like they can fight. But he even says, he goes, you guys are going to think I'm ruthless because I haven't let you fight and I haven't fought and stuff like that. But this is all changing. It's time for us to fight the Trojans. And they all want to fight. So they've all just been waiting and picking their between their toes, waiting for the chance to go and fight and rejoin the war. And so he says, right in the front of them, Patroclus in Achilles' armor is right up in front of all of these troops. And so this is the point when everything falls into place, I guess. So, and this is really, it's kind of really important too, that Achilles actually prays to Jove, to Zeus, and says, please, make this all work. Help us, send the Trojans back. And he says, I shall stay here where my ships are lying, but I shall send my comrade. And he says, grant that victory may go with him. That's Patroclus. Put your courage in his heart, that Hector may learn whether my squire is man enough to fight alone, or whether his might is only so indomitable when I am entering. So let him, essentially let Hector fall to him. And once he's let the fight, move, once he shifted it away from the ships, grant that he may return unharmed with his armor and his comrades, fighters in close combat. So he prays to Zeus, let him win, and then let him return safely to me with my armor back on, still on. And he says, and essentially Jove answers half the prayer. Jove knows what has to happen because of fate. So he granted that Patroclus should turn the tide of battle, but refused to let him come safely out of the fight. So there's no, what there isn't is, this is no surprise in any of this story. We know what's going to happen. And so he goes off to fight. And all of this is about, essentially having bravery, being willing to go and risk your life. And so Patroclus, of course, hopes he doesn't die. But he knows what he wants to do. He wants to, push the Trojans back, and he hopes he can do that, but he also hopes he can survive. But he's willing to put his neck at risk by putting on Achilles' armor. And so just Patroclus appearing, he boing, here he is in Achilles' armor, and people go, "Hurr!" And they start, like, literally, some of them start running. And immediately the Greeks start winning, just because Achilles is dang right there on the battlefield. And so it's funny because that's, it's true. It just shows how Achilles thinks, hey, I'm the best warrior ever. Well, everyone thinks that he's the best warrior ever. So then we go into more and more battle. And do we have to remember every single thing? Again, every person who dies, every person? No, we don't. But we have to see what Patroclus is doing. And so he springs over the trench. Remember, that was the boundary around the Greek ships. And he is intent on trying to get near Hector. For he had his heart set on spearing him. Hector's horses, of course, he's in a chariot, so that he's not going to catch up with him too easily. And remember, though, what did Achilles ask him to do? He says, get him away from the ships, but then come back. But that's not what Patroclus is doing. He's going. And it said, he's following the Trojans. They're retreating all the way back to the city. And he was trying to stop them. He's chasing after them. Now, of course, this is his fate. His fate is to disobey what Achilles said. Achilles said, come back. He's fated to go too far. Okay. And so here's Sarpedon. Remember that Zeus named him. He's his kid. And he sees that Patroclus has been winning, and he's like, dang it, we need to stop retreating. Let's go and fight him. And of course, what's going to happen to Sarpedon? According to Zeus, that's what Zeus said. He said Patroclus is going to kill him. And they fight, and he's sad. Actually, Zeus is he expresses this. He looks to his wife, who he was earlier mad at, and he goes, "Alas, that it should be the lot of Sarpedon, whom I love so dearly, to perish by the hand of Patroclus." And he goes, "I really would love to just save him, to pick him up, catch him up out of the fight, and set him down safe and sound." And Juno says, "Zeus," or well, Jove in this case, "you can't do that. If you do that and you go against fate, you can't stop any of the other gods from. It's gonna be, a mess. You have to do what fate says. And if you don't, other gods are going to do the same thing. They're going to want to protect their people. And then all of a sudden, nothing's going to make any sense. I understand that you love him and that you pity him, but he has to fall by the hand of Patroclus. That is his fate. But as soon as the life is gone out of him, send death and sweet sleep to bear him off the field. So make his passing easy. But he has to die. And so this is what, again, we get that lesson. Even the gods remind us about, because we certainly can't escape our fate. We can't live forever. We can't escape what is going to happen to us, but neither can the gods. And that's what we have to, so it's just like a reminder. So Patroclus meets Sarpedon, kills Sarpedon. And in fact, much of the reason he wins is because his spears don't, they don't hit Patroclus when they're supposed to. They miss their targets. And for the most part, the Greeks just blame the gods. Oh, the gods are moving it this way, or the gods are moving it that way, and stuff like that. And Sarpedon dies. And so, and because he's speared by Patroclus. And so Sarpedon's soul actually dies at the very moment. Well, it goes off to Hades at the very moment that the spear point is being pulled out of him. And so Glaucus sees what happens. He's all upset because Sarpedon's his brother and he couldn't help him. And so they're all, but again, this is war. And so then Glaucus appeals to Apollo. And you remember Apollo really likes the Trojans. And he says, "Can you imagine?" He goes, "Jove's son Sarpedon was slain. What are we going to do? Heal me of my wound, ease my pain so that I can go and get vengeance. And I can win over Patroclus." Now, Glaucus doesn't kill Patroclus, but Apollo does hear his prayer. Apollo, though, and this is where we get to really what happens to Patroclus. We have all these new people, but all these essentially what's happening is all of the Trojans are turning around and they're not fleeing anymore because Sarpedon got killed. And so they're like, "For Sarpedon," so they're all praying to Apollo. They're all trying to get help from Apollo. And then Zeus tells Apollo, "Okay, now you can go take Sarpedon's body out of range and then bear him away. But then you can do whatever you want." And Apollo does exactly that, takes Sarpedon's body and saves that. And then Patroclus is still fighting, but near the very end, this is when Apollo and Jove start actually, dealing with what's going to happen in the next part of the fate. Okay. And it says, "Had he but obeyed," this is Patroclus, "the bidding of the son of Peleus, he would have escaped death and have been scatheless." In other words, if he had run back now, or if he had not come this far, he would not have the fate that he's going to have now. But in so many ways, it's actually the gods that in some ways had an effect on this and made him run far too far. And now he's going to pay for it. And the poet is actually addressing him. "Oh, and who last was slain by you, O Patroclus, when the gods had now called you to meet your doom? So you will die now. This is the time when it's all going to happen." And essentially, Patroclus is still killing people, and he would have done even more had not Phoebus Apollo taken his stand upon the wall to defeat his purpose and aid the Trojans. So the Patroclus is trying to get over the wall. Thrice, 3 times Patroclus tried to charge up the high wall, and Apollo is the one who beat him back. Otherwise, they would have gotten over the wall. When Patroclus is like trying to get over the wall, and Apollo even yells at him, "Stop it. You will not sack the city of Troy. This is not your fate. And it's not going to be Achilles' fate either. And he's a far better man than you." And Patroclus hears the voice of Apollo and goes, "Okay, yeah, no, I won't run towards that anymore." But Hector is there. And so how does Hector win? Apollo goes and strikes panic into the Greeks. And Hector is the one who's, now he has kind of a resurgence of bravery or whatever. And he doesn't try to fight any of the other Greeks. He drives straight at Patroclus. And Patroclus gets off of his chariot to the ground, and with a spear, he's going to try to hold on and fight Hector. He stood still and threw it. Of course, that's the spear. Nor did it go far without hitting someone, but it wasn't Hector. It killed his charioteer, Cebriones. And it actually hit him smack dab in the middle of his head, drove his brows into his head, for the bone was smashed, and his eyes fell to the ground at his feet. So it popped his head open, which is really graphic. But essentially, Patroclus doesn't, he wants to kill Hector, but that's not in the cards. That's not what's going to happen. So Hector gets off of his chariot, and then they fight over Cebriones, the body. Okay. And so Patroclus might have even been okay, except something happens, and it's not fair, but it's what happens. And so Patroclus is, ready to go, and he killed 9 men, but as he was coming on like a god for a time, then this is when bad stuff happens. So this is Apollo again. Patroclus didn't see Apollo as he moved about in the crush, for he was enshrouded in a thick darkness, and the gods struck him from behind. So literally, he's in the middle of fighting people. Apollo climbs up behind him, smacks him on the back, and makes him dizzy. And then he beats the helmet off his head, and it rolled rattling off under the horse's feet, where its horsehair plumes were all begrimed with dust and blood. As soon as he does that, of course, what happens? If his helmet's popped off, what do the Trojans see? Well, they see that that's not Achilles. And they're like, wait a second. That's not Achilles at all. So Hector thought he was fighting Achilles, and he's not. He's fighting Patroclus. And not only that, but he also Apollo broke his spear. And so Patroclus can't toss a spear at him. And then his shield that covered him from head to foot fell to the ground, as did all the band that held it, and Apollo undid the fastenings of his corslet. Essentially, Apollo knocks all of his armor off. So everything that was protecting him, and also hiding the fact that it wasn't Achilles, is gone. Out on this, his mind became clouded. His limbs failed him, and he stood as one dazed. So he kind of knocks him up. The Apollo does. He slaps him up all over the place, and so Patroclus doesn't even know which day it is. And as soon as he does that, Euphorbus comes up, and he actually came from behind and struck him in the back with a spear, midway between the shoulders. So first, Apollo rips all of his armor off. So Patroclus is not like the greatest warrior ever, but he's not a bad dude. He would have not died if Apollo hadn't intervened. Okay, so now Patroclus has a huge spear in his back. And then Euphorbus runs away. And now, so Patroclus is standing there unarmed, with a huge blow from the god that kind of knocked him senseless. And then he has a spear stuck in his back. Okay, Hector sees it. He's already wounded. So this is not a great kill. Hector is not super brave for doing what he did, but he comes up sees that he's wounded, forces his way through, and strikes him in the lower part of the belly with a spear. He stabs him. He's already been struck with a in the back with a spear, but in the front, Hector stabs him in the belly with a spear, driving the bronze point right through it so that he fell heavily to the ground. And so he can't win. There's no way Patroclus is going to survive this. And then Hector addresses Patroclus. He says, you thought you would sack our city, is all this boasting stuff, rob our Trojan women of their freedom, carry them off in your ships, but you are a fool. Hector and his fleet horses were ever straining their utmost to defend them. And I am the foremost of all the Trojan warriors. So he's a lot of bragging. And he says, Achilles probably told you to run to the walls, and even said, come not back to the ships until you've rent the bloodstained shirt of murderous Hector. Like, he's saying Achilles probably sent you to come and kill me, but you will not. You can't. I'm the greatest Trojan warrior. And Patroclus says, go ahead and brag, but it's Jove and Apollo that got your victory. They vanquished me. They stripped my armor. And in fact, you weren't even the first person to attack me. So don't brag about this kill, because Euphorbus is the one who stabbed me in the back after all these other people, the gods took all my armor off. So you are yourself third only in killing me. So don't brag about it, is what he's saying. And then he tells them, he goes, death and the day of your doom are close upon you, and they will lay you low by the hand of Achilles. So, okay, you can say, oh, I killed you, ha, ha, ha. You really didn't, and you're going to get it. Achilles is going to come after you and kill you. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And then, but of course, Hector doesn't believe it. Hector and Patroclus dies right then. So he essentially tells Hector his fate and dies. And Hector is like, oh, he's still mocking him, even though he's dead. And he goes, why should you foretell my doom? Who knows, but Achilles might be killed by me. In other words, if we meet, or when we meet, I might kill Achilles. And he takes the spear out of the wound, and Patroclus's soul is gone. So it's bloody. I mean, it's not like Hector's a bad dude, but he is still the enemy. So any thoughts on this? I mean, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorder. But did that clarify kind of what was going on, and also what you didn't have to necessarily remember? Like, you don't have to remember all the names of everybody. I'm not going to say who stabbed so-and-so. I might ask about Apollo, things that, what did Apollo do to really help the Trojans? And, he invigorated, of course, Hector, but he also stripped Patroclus's armor. That's probably the most important step he takes. Because Achilles, there's no way Patroclus probably would have died, at least certainly not this easily. Patroclus just walked into it, and then an Apollo had set a trap for him, essentially. So if you do have any questions, you can always too ask in the journals. Please, please, please feel free. Yes, it's always the Trojans versus the Greeks, and it's called the Iliad because of Ilium. That's the other name for the city of Troy. And so it's really all about the last year of the war, and it's really more about Achilles than anything else. So that's the main hero. He and Hector are probably the two main characters of this. But Patroclus is probably third. But now Patroclus is dead. So we're a little over halfway through the book. We're 16 books in, and Patroclus is dead. Now, of course, the question is, what do you think is going to happen when Achilles finds out that his best friend is gone? And we kind of know. Yeah, we thought Achilles was mad before. Now we know what it really means for Achilles to be angry. So Achilles is, certainly probably his biggest flaw is his anger. But it's also what makes him fight as hard as he does. So he's going to be upset because Patroclus is gone. He's going to be mad at Patroclus too, because Patroclus didn't do what he said. But he's mostly mad at Hector. In fact, he's more mad at Hector than he even is at Apollo and all the. And you can't be mad at a god because you can't really fight a god. But he can be mad at Hector, and he can take all of that frustration and anger and loss and grief out on somebody, and that's what he does. So the next, what we're going to read, what you're reading going forward, the books that I've picked for you for this week coming, they're all covering how does Hector die? What does Achilles do? And what does Hector's father eventually do to kind of create a reconciliation? Because Priam is the one of the main characters of the final books. And it takes a lot of bravery to do what he does too, but it kind of gets rid of the anger that Achilles has, and that desire for vengeance. And you get to recognize really the loss of Patroclus is very similar to the loss of Hector. Even though Hector's on the opposing side, he is heroic. He is a hero, he's a good fighter, and he's not a bad dude. So it's interesting to see that, to see that sympathy when this is a Greek play. I mean, a Greek epic poem. But any questions? If you have any, you can feel free to ask. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording though.